Hello, friends, and welcome to the Creativity, Spirituality, and Making a Buck podcast with David Nichtern on the Be Here Now network. My name is Michael Kammers, your podkick and monologist. All of us here at Be Here Now and Dharma Moon sincerely hope this podcast finds you as well as can be, and we are happy that you are joining us. Here at CSM, our guide, senior Buddhist teacher, musician, and entrepreneur David Nichtern discusses how to lead an integrated life involving spiritual practice, creative expression, and right livelihood with our guests who embody and manifest these principles in their own life. We rotate guest episodes with mini episodes of David and I in discussion, and this is one of those episodes with the two of us in conversation around working with desire from a Buddhist perspective. As you'll hear, these conversations arise out of spontaneous dialogue with David and I before each session. Broadly speaking, before this particular discussion, I had shared with David that due to my mindfulness awareness practice, at times I can stay with strong energies that arise in my experience without indulging, repressing, or ignoring them. So part of the premise here may be, once we've cut through habitual patterns and we're on the spot with all that energy, particularly desire and passion, then what? Also, in this episode, you will bear witness to the fact that I am not a morning person. This was the first AM podcast we recorded during this session, and you'll see my mind, body, and energy slowly coming around over the course of this episode, so thank you in advance for your patience and understanding. All right, that's enough table setting. Thank you for listening, and on to the main course. Hello, friends, and welcome to the Creativity, Spirituality, and Making a Buck on the Be Here Now network with our guide and host, David Nichtern. I am Michael Kammers, David's podkick, trusty podkick, and in this episode, the two of us will be in discussion on how Buddhists address desire. I don't know about you, David. I'm feeling a lot of excitement about this podcast.
Yeah, and as usual, friends, Michael and I leap into the open space dimension of communication. And we just started spontaneously speaking about this before the podcast got underway. And I just said, let's talk about that. So that's often how we do it, right, Mike?
It's true. Just right in the moment. First thought, best thought.
And you could argue that we just don't really know what we're doing. So therefore we're grasping at straws, spontaneous straws, or that there is something in the flow and synchronicity of our ongoing conversation that is picking up threads from, our ecosystem, our environment around us, people we've been talking to. So it started with you actually bringing up, what was the question that you brought up?
Well, speaking of the sort of spontaneous wisdom of the moment, I have no recollection of the question.
Yeah. I find, as you know, Mike, and probably our friends out there know, I do a lot of teaching these days. And that involves the Zoom, not the usual cues of physical presence. And, of course, more of that has been happening lately too, where you're actually in physical contact with people and communicating. But in that Zoom space, when we're talking sometimes, and I have to, be taking the seat of the person who's receiving the questions and therefore generating something which could be taken as an answer, theoretically, if somebody thought it that way. So I often find myself in the situation of I talk for a little while and then I go, well, what was the question again? So the question just kind of launches a zone and then you're off and running into it.
Yeah. Well, I think we're off to a great start.
Yeah. Well, and then in the anecdotal realm, since there's a lot of associative kind of process in what we're doing, I was taken back to a moment in which I met Carl Reiner, the brilliant and famous and world-renowned Carl Reiner in a context many years ago, and actually it was an event, and Mel Brooks was there too. So very briefly, I met Mel Brooks, but I was sort of talking to Carl Reiner and more. And Carl's daughter, who was a friend of mine, said, "Dad, doesn't David look like Grandma?" Oh no, he said, "Doesn't David look like he could be in our family?" Because like our sort of cultural and DNA thing was, and then Carl Reiner said, "Yeah, he looks like he could be in our family. Actually, he looks like my mother." And then he gave me a big wet kiss on the cheek.
Oh, how sweet.
Yeah, it was beyond sweet. It was like, those guys are lifetime idols for me, as for many people, and have quoted them, have used their riffs ceaselessly, and they ended up sitting together, in these chairs next to each other, having lunch and just watching TV for many of the last several years. And I just thought, oh, could I be a fly on the wall? Please let me reincarnate as a fly on the wall with my present intelligence to be able to hear the riffs that must have been going on between the two of them at this stage of the game. So many best wishes to the Reiner clan. And I actually did a film score for a project that Lucas, who's his second son, did. So I feel a connection there. But the long story short, you want to talk about spontaneity. And also this idea of we start with a question, and here's I am now going to weave us back. Carl said to me, my wife is Jewish, but she weren't concerned that if she was Jewish enough for his family, to meet his family. So that's a whole tribal thing that some people are going to relate to from their own tribe. And he said, to be Jewish enough, all you have to do is answer a question with a question. That's a cultural thing. Like, are you saying I should answer a question with a question? There's a perfect example. So in terms of our conversation, you raised the question of desire, but you don't recall the exact context, which is fine. But how about
the context? I don't remember the exact question.
Okay, what was the context?
Well, we were talking about my own desire to, like, as an entertainer and somebody who wants to be seen and enjoys that kind of feedback with the environment, and sort of also the desire to really merge with experience.
Yeah, in a sense, you were asking also, is it cool from a Buddhist perspective to have desire? Or what do you do with it?
Yeah, I think, I mean, clearly it seems like this is something that arises in the human experience. So how to work with it?
Not only that, it is, as you remember from the 6 realms, it is the exact texture of the human realm, which every Buddhist says that's where you want to be. That is the precious human birth situation. That is the Dharma, bullseye to have that kind of free and well-favored situation where you can have a life, have a human body, have relationships, everything that goes with it. It is a, passion or desire are the insignia, the watermark of that particular realm. And then because it's a realm, it's also not considered liberation that you could experience those things. It's how you work with them, isn't it?
Could you say that last part again?
It's not inherently liberating to either repress desire or indulge it. It's how you work with it that's potentially liberating, which is the Buddhist approach. So what are you liberating yourself from would be a really good question. When you have desire, what's the part of it that gets you stuck, that creates suffering, that creates pain, harm for other people? You said a great thing, actually, in our earlier iteration, which was, can you repeat, what I'm talking about?
I'm a great podcast today. I don't remember exactly.
Well, you said something about when you experience desire for another person.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah. It's like when you desire anything, you can lose any sight of well-being, or even that's even a person. It just becomes an object of desire that like you are grasping towards blindly even.
Right. And that gets into the realm of objectification of the object of the desire, which is something we haven't really spoken about. We're talking about the person who's experiencing it. Now, if there's an object and it's a cookie, we're not here to, there's no cookie realm that I'm aware of in Buddhism. We're not trying to protect or the well-being of the cookie per se. You could say there's a chain of events there that you could track. But in relation to another person, how does our desire manifest? And is it creating blindness on our part? Is it creating a lack of awareness? So, as you know, Mike, the big source code for confusion and suffering in the Buddhist way of looking at it is ignorance. That you're not, or more precisely, marigpa, or avidya in Sanskrit, marigpa in Tibetan, a negation of awareness. You lose awareness. Then the whole six realms appears out of, a kind of cascading effect of ongoing circumstances. So at that moment when you lose the awareness, of course you would lose track of that there even is another person with a separate consciousness. And then we're always stunned when they talk and say something completely different than what we expected. Aren't we? Yeah.
I think part of that ignorance is like, it's an environment. And Trungpa Rinpoche in Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism, when he talks about the realms, he uses the word environment, and he says that our thought and our emotions, like they kind of fuse and they become an environment. And then that realm is the environment that we're inhabiting that's a daydream,
Yeah.
to use your word. And when you're in that daydream, not only is there that sense of desire and you're kind of blinded with the Ma Rigpa or Avidya, then there's this whole discursivity in this story. And then when you bump up against reality and that other person says something that pops like wait, what is this? That's actually the universal guru or the mandala, whatever. Like that's reality. Pop in your bubble.
Yeah, pop in the bubble. Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was a different book than Awakening from the Daydream. But bubble theory, I had an idea for a book called Bubble Theory because it's another way of looking at it, is that we're in bubbles. And there's individual bubbles, there's group bubbles, like Dharma Moon's a bubble of its own kind. Your family's a bubble. The Republican Party, the Democratic Party are bubbles. People tend to resonate, reproduce, reiterate perspectives that make it bubbly. Like if somebody, I watch a lot on YouTube because I'm fascinated by the perspective of the left and the right in this country and this world, for that matter. If you look at it, it's what's causing there's a lot of engine going on there about creating disharmony, disunity, outright violence. Because people from one perspective or another are literally not able to hear the other perspective or give it any credence. So I like to go both sides of it just to make sure I'm not missing anything. And, but is there a way to have discourse, or as you're saying, passionate communication? Let's include that in there too, without annihilating the object of your, then passion becomes aggression, right? You're actually sort of, and it can become ignorance. You're shutting down the very thing that you're trying to communicate with. You're disavowing it, whether it's a love interest or a political opponent. You can't create a communication field. And in the communication field, you said earlier, compassion. So we should talk maybe more about what's the difference between compassion and passion, since they both have the same word in it.
Well, to use that, maybe we go from this sometimes you say like passion, aggression, and ignorance is like the red, blue, and green, the three colors from the old TVs.
RGB, yeah.
RGB. And it's really good because they kind of all cloud together. And so in my understanding, the real root one is that the like Ma Rigpa or the Avidya is like this real fundamental bewilderment of our true nature, right? And then we create this whole edifice on top of that's like claustrophobic and singular or in a cocoon. And then when we get into these bubbles, we define ourselves by this bubble. It becomes merged with our identity.
Right.
So if I'm a liberal Democrat or if you're a Republican or whatever that might be, now we have like an in-group and an out-group based even on like mythic literalism of some sort, right? Like these bubbles have stories that we believe this is reality. And it becomes so solid that we lose the communicate to hear each other and to communicate compassionately. And I'm actually going to tie this into a piece of art that I saw by a recent podcast guest, Robert Ryan. He posted this amazing painting called Disinformation Tarot. And he likened our present experience to the Bible story of the Tower of Babel with we can't communicate because of all these things, right?
Yeah. So, well, and that's called babbling. You know that comes from there, right? Did you know that?
It makes sense.
Yeah, when somebody's babbling, tell more about the story of Babel because it's the archetype and the rude metaphor for loss of the ability to communicate. What happened in the Tower of Babel?
Well, it seems like all these different, let's say, tribes or groups of humans had the ability to communicate together clearly, and then they wanted to build a tower all the way up to heaven. Correct? And so it's a Bible story, so the God in the Christian religion, I was raised Roman Catholic, makes them lose the ability to understand each other, that they cannot reach heaven. And so, in a way, it's like hubris.
Yeah. But what happens is that their language is splintered.
Yeah.
And, this is, if you travel a lot, you can have this experience. When I go to Japan and, you realize I can't really understand what people are saying. And a lot of times I'm sitting at dinners there and, my hosts are usually bilingual. So there's a bridge that I can use to walk across. But some of the time I don't walk across the bridge. I just allow myself to be in a borderline dissociative state because people are talking, but I cannot understand at all what they mean, what they're saying. So I end up looking at their faces and their gestures and the vibe and see if you can tune in that way. But that is that's the myth of the Tower of Babel is that all of a sudden everybody's got different languages and they can't understand each other. And I think it's a metaphor. You could say in any intimate relationship has a Tower of Babel element to it. You moved into it, as you said, through desire, through sense of connection and wanting to connect further. And then there's a lot of comedy about this. You just go, I don't understand what you're saying to the person you live with. What are you talking about? And so I think you had the key, Michael, that does the desire shut down the communication so you become just obsessed with your own need for identity. And that probably is, from a Buddhist perspective, something to be vetted rather than just blindly going along with that, like desire for fame or for recognition, or you'd almost say you want to modulate that and back off from that approach a little bit to not until you became aware of the mechanism that it was setting into place for creating further suffering.
The non-self, you're saying, in regards to that?
Yeah, I mean, you if it's building up, if the desire is building up a strong sense of self and identity and separation, whether you're aware of that or not, like you just said the great thing of like, you desire this person, but you're not even really aware of what their process is. For everybody who's ever fallen in love or trying to, and that's, if you're human, you're either in love, breaking up, or trying to fall in love. It's just,
That's true.
isn't that true? I mean, I know there's some people out there going, oh, no, let's talk.
Sustaining love.
Well, sure. People are trying to create relationships at some level. There are a few hermits, but they're not really dealing with this question the same way that the rest of the lay practitioner community is. So I don't have advice for the severe yogis and hermits or monastics. That's a different code, a different set of advice. They, of course, have to deal with desire. For example, I know a bunch of fat Rinpoches who have a sweet tooth and diabetes. And you go, wait a minute, you have this kind of mastery of the situation. Are you just allowing yourself some humanity there? What is going on there? And it's somehow never the idea that this person has achieved a state of perfect discipline in which they're completely repressed and don't have to deal with the rising of desire in their mind and body. So this is really a good conversation. I don't know if it's a one-shot deal or not. Maybe that's a good intro to it and maybe we can do Desire Part 2 and Desire Part 3. So what do you think? Is that a good point to pause?
Well, yeah. And I think in a way we're to the point of like whether you're a monastic or a householder or a lay person, desire is going to arise. And then as sentient beings, if we're aware, we have an ability to choose, right? So whether or not the big in the nidanas or in the Buddhist chain of karma, there's a really, as you've taught, and I also hold the view, I forget which number of the nidanas there are. There's craving, and then there's grasping.
Right.
So tune back in, perhaps, to part 2, when maybe we'll discuss craving and grasping. What do you think?
Yeah, that's good. That's a good jump-off point because, and just to put a bow on it, you could say the Buddha, whenever a Buddha attains that kind of level of complete realization, actually exits the human realm as a realm. And so all of the klesha activity is transformed into compassion. So that you could say the desire and the compassion have become completely linked. The desire is for the liberation of all beings. That's that you could say, well, I took a vow for that. You have a desire to see that. Yeah, and you could say yes, because the desire and the compassion are no longer distinct. And therefore, if you are in love, you'd be really, really open-hearted to the well-being and success and joy of your partner, your companions. But that's such a big field, and I don't think it would feel exactly like the conventional version of possessiveness and those kind of things. There would be some kind of transformation of that energy into a very open style of communication, and we have seen it. It's possible, and we're all at different stages of trying to explore that because the other thing doesn't work. I mean, that's the big argument. Samsara just doesn't really work. It just reproduces itself, and it's creating a kind of sense of dissatisfaction. It's basic 101. So to be continued, ladies and gentlemen, and other friends, and however you want to be thought of. We're interested in hearing from you, always, and if people can stay in touch. And I think, again, thanks to Michael for really being the catalyst for this whole communication. So thanks, Michael.
Thank you, David, for being in communication. I'm grateful for you and to be in this role. And I sincerely hope that our conversations are a benefit to our listeners and their practice in daily lives. So thank you, everyone. Tune back in. All right, everybody. Welcome to an improvised outro. 1, we would like to thank you for listening and supporting this podcast, Creativity, Spirituality, and Making a Buck with David Nichtern on the Be Here Now Network. If you enjoy these conversations with David and I, we encourage you to join the conversation and join us. There's a couple ways you could do that. One, you could email me at michaelk@dharmamoon.com and make a suggestion for what you'd like to hear David and I talking about. Two, if you are into this discussion and this practice, we encourage you to join us in community. Head over to www.dharmamoon.com and check out all of our programming. On the third Sunday of each month, we have an open community sit at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Depending on when this podcast runs, it's likely that you could still sign up for our 100-hour mindfulness meditation teacher training program in the fall. And if you don't want to take a full 100-hour teacher training, you can just take the first weekend, which is an amazing overview and transmission of mindfulness, awareness, contemplation, and loving kindness practices. It's a really great way to kickstart and help establish and deepen your meditation practice, which is what we are committed to here at Dharma Moon. Perhaps if we can access a little peace within ourselves, we could live in a more peaceful world. May it be so. That being said, we would also like to thank the Be Here Now Network and everybody who works there for everything, for continuing Ram Dass's legacy and for the post-production and distribution of this podcast. We really appreciate everybody over there. So a hearty thank you from us to you. Also, if you like Be Here Now Network, if you like Ram Dass, head over to their website, www.BeHereNowNetwork.com. You can put a /David there to see more of these podcasts with David Nichtern. But there are many, many podcasts there with amazing teachers, Jack Kornfield, Sharon Salzberg. So yeah, get into it. Head over to Be Here Now, connect with them. And I think it might be the tail ending of their fundraising drive. It all depends on when this podcast gets out. And this is evergreen, so we appreciate you listening and encourage you to support Be Here Now Network. Okay, I have said all the things. And if you're still listening, I hope you're doing well. I mean, you listened to a whole outro. That's pretty amazing. So, may you be safe, healthy, happy, and at ease. All the best.